Hello again, everyone. Harry Powell here for SevereMMA, and I am joined by the man himself, Brett Johns. Brett, how's it going, sir?
I'm okay. I'm very good, thank you. Yeah, obviously it's been 3 weeks since the last fight, a couple of little niggly injuries, and a shit ton of food. But we're all good though.
Okay, well, let's start there. I'm going to forget everything I've got on my list, and let's start there. Post-fight press conference, or in the cage maybe, or the Instagram post afterwards. I can't quite remember. It all blends into one thing. You mentioned that you fought with an injury that many people would have pulled out from. I think you said it was a rib injury, right?
Yeah, originally, yeah, it was. Yeah, so I think obviously the scheduled fight originally was against James, and unfortunately, about 6 weeks before the fight, he had to pull out of that contest and was replaced by Winsky. And then we had the Winsky name, and about 2 or 3 days later, I was in a wrestling session on a Thursday morning. I'd already done that morning. I already done a bit of no-gi grappling, and I remember that day quite clear because I had a wedding on in the afternoon, so I wanted to get as much training as possible in that morning. So I think I got up at I think it was like 10 to 5. I got to the gym by about 6 o'clock ish or something, 6:30 to do the nogi, and then when 9 o'clock came, I did the wrestling class. Maybe I was biting off more than what I could chew subconsciously, and then the no gi class was quite tough, but let alone the wrestling session after it. And we had an hour of wrestling, and I think I literally looked at the clock, and it was the last bit of the session, with 2 minutes left, and I was put through a bit of a shark tank where I had a fresh partner on me every minute, wall wrestling, and I tried to put like an underhook in, and my rib just went bang. Like it felt like a lot of movement. It was a quick it didn't feel broke. Obviously, I'd like to think with a broken rib, that's quite a distinctive thing. That's usually from impact, but this was just weird. I moved slightly, and it felt like my whole right side of my rib cage just suddenly moved and went back in or whatever it did. So I'm still like unaware what happened. I think that kind of scared me a little bit because when it comes to like injuries, if I throw a punch, hit something, and break my hand, I know myself. I've punched something, I broke my hand. It's quite simple. But with this injury, it's the first time in my career where, sorry, the second time this happened actually, where I've done something and it's just gone with everyday movement. So that was a bit concerning. And I think after that, I was like, everybody in the gym who was sparring me and grappling me were kind of on eggshells, as if I'm like made of glass. And everybody in the gym who was training me at that time, I've got to thank, because I think they took their time with me and understood that I was slightly injured. So you know, still to this day, I got no explanation. I that's all I know was I was in a lot of pain, and then the weeks leading up, I was still in a lot of pain, and I didn't grapple for about 6 weeks before that fight. It was just all pads, running and cycling, really.
So talk me through. Talk me through. You're a man who it is literally of prime importance that your body is your method of earning money, right? If your body doesn't work for whatever reason, if your body is impaired, your ability to make money loosens. So talk me through that internal conversation where you make just a regular positional change, or what you determine to be a regular positional change. Something happens, whatever it is, you get an injury, and then you say, I'm still going to take this fight against another human that wants to do physical damage to me in 6 weeks.
Yeah, to be honest, that's a big point. Like, I'm kind of going to contradict myself a little bit, because I do this because I love the sport. I love the sport. I love the feeling of winning. I love being able to walk out into the crowd and seeing different faces and seeing different people's expression when I walk out. I love being in there and just feeling that, it's very difficult to explain. The best way I could possibly say it, it's a very real moment. Things I've experienced a lot of different things in my life, but the feeling I get when I fight is an unexplainable feeling. And I love that feeling. I do. It's scary, but it's exciting, and I love that about it. And I've never been a person that was going to, do relaxing things with my life. I've always been involved in quite, high pressured situations, a lot of like adrenaline, and yeah, like obviously I do it for that feeling, and I love that feeling every time. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't one eye on the financial element of fighting. I think a lot of fighters go out there, and I think the majority of fighters that step into a fight slightly injured, I'd say 90% of them are doing it for a financial reason. The same as me, my last fight. It wasn't a very clever decision, but it was a decision I made because financially I needed that fight. So, and that's not to say I've got any money issues whatsoever, but you don't want to miss a payday. It's these are paydays, and like as for people, some people get paid at the end of the month. Some people get paid at the end of the week. We only get paid like once or twice a year if you're a full-time fighter. And myself, that's why I'm aiming to fight all the time, because I'm trying to get them more paydays in. Instead of getting 2 paydays a year, I'd like 3 paydays a year. And that was probably the decision that I made in my head. And looking back now, it probably wasn't a wise decision. Like I'm getting a lot older. I'm starting to feel these niggles coming through as well. And like in the grand scheme of things, I'm 30 years old, and a lot of people will be like, "Oh, well, you're just 30 years old." Yeah, but I think a lot of people look at it differently. You've got 2 guys who are 30, but you've got one guy who started mixed martial arts when he was 16, and then the other guy who started judo when he was 4 years old. Like the guy who started judo 4 years old has done a lot more fighting than the other guy, if you understand what I mean. And unfortunately, in that circumstance, I'm the 4-year-old boy that did judo. You know what I mean? So yeah, like I said, it wasn't a very wise decision. It wasn't a wise decision for my health. It wasn't a wise decision to go in there compromised. But luckily enough, we went in there. We executed the game plan the way we'd like to have. Obviously, it went slightly different. We would have liked to finish, but unfortunately, when I went in there, I kind of had planned that I was going to do it in the later part of the rounds, and then another injury picked up during the fight. Then,
So I'm going to preface this question with a bit of spiel, but bear with me. You have that duality in you, right? You have the athlete that enjoys competition, that enjoys the cerebral focus that fighting can give you. He enjoys the emotional disconnect, but also the emotional presence that fighting can give you. That those 15 minutes or those 25 minutes, depending on what you're scheduled. And then the other side of that, you have the businessman, Brett Johns, who has a family to feed and a house to look after and dogs to put food in their bowls and all of this stuff. And you mentioned there that, a wise decision for one is not necessarily a wise decision for the other. And you're always constantly debating these two sides of you, right? When it comes down to it, do you find that MMA, given that it's such a taxing sport on the body, given that it's such a taxing sport on your emotions, on your brain health, and you're only getting 2 paydays a year, potentially, right? Some fighters get 1 payday a year. Some fighters get no paydays a year. Some fighters get 5 paydays a year. Do you feel like the momentum swing of the frequency of fighting when you're starting out, when you may have 5 fights a year, 6 fights a year, to now at your level where you're fighting the elite of the elite at the top tier of your weight class, you're taking far more time to prepare for these bouts? Which one do you think sort of works best?
It was tough to say, really, because I obviously work with a lot of amateur fighters as well, and like I've got the privilege of watching these guys going through the start of their careers now, and the majority of them, especially down in SMMA with Richard Shaw and Carl Parker, a lot of them youngsters are going to be UFC level, Bellator level, Cage Warrior champions. I can just see it, because of they've got the guidance from a very young age, not the guidance that I had at a young age, and it's amazing to see. But when I was an amateur, like you said there, I think looking back, I think this is one of the stats I looked back a couple of days ago, and someone brought it up to me in the gym. I was fighting super often. I mean, like, I think in like 2013, I think I fought maybe no, sorry, 2012. I fought 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I fought 7 times in 2012. You know, and no major injuries whatsoever. You know what I mean? It wasn't no major injuries there. And then I went through that 2012 stint of literally, I think I went into 2012 2-0 as an amateur, and then got out of 2012. I was 5-0 as an amateur. I think I was 5-0 or maybe 6-0 as a pro. So the rise basically for myself, I was one of the lucky ones where my rise was quite quickly. You know, I had my first ever fight in October 2011, and by September 2013, I was Cage Warriors World Champion. You know, it's a very quick rise. But going back to that question, it's like, yeah, I loved fighting every weekend. I would have, you know, obviously back then it was slightly different with the weight categories. You know, I couldn't do that now. It'd be virtually impossible for me to fight that often and get to the weight that I needed to get to. But I always said I always enjoyed more as an amateur than what I do now, because of the business elements of things, the stresses of having every fight, you know, the weight, you know, I've never really had, like, obviously I had my past issues with my weight, but I've got over that, being with a new gym and had new guidance and got new coaches involved with the nutritional side of things. But if I'm honest, I do anything to go back to my amateur career and just spend a couple of months just going back over them fights. You know, the pressure was away. I was doing fighting for a different reason to what. Although I still got that same reason of why I fight, there's added reasons why I fight now. You know, at the end of the day, I fought for the fun of it. You know, I think my first ever fight, I must have got paid £100, and then my second fight, I didn't get paid at all because the promoter didn't make enough money to pay me. So these are but then again, I would have done anything in the world to go back and do the same thing again, because there was no pressure. And now, obviously, the risk and reward right now is absolutely ginormous, and that will create that subconscious pressure there, you know.
And that's a beautiful segue. And you mentioned, I mean, it's essentially when you're living as a 15, 16, 17-year-old, you feel like you're an adult, but actually there's no pressure whatsoever. And those are some of the real high points of your life. And that's exactly the same as when you're fighting amateur. Now, every sparring session has to mean something. Every weight session has to mean something. Every wrestling session has to mean something, because there's a name on a piece of paper that's an extremely highly skilled opponent. Whereas at amateur, it doesn't matter if you win or lose. You're going for the experience of fighting, right? I wanted to talk about your approach to fighting. You again mentioned something in that Instagram post, and it's something that you've spoken about throughout your career. Fighting is both a means to get paid, right? And in most contracts, you're on a win bonus and a show. But fighting is also entertainment, right? You mentioned it there. There's a lot of business side. There's the social media. There's the interviews. There's the this. There's the that. If I was to whittle all of that down and just ask you as you, what's your approach to fighting? Is it winning or is it putting on a show?
Look, I've had fights in the past which have been really extremely boring, and I've had fights in the past where I've walked out of UFC bouts with fight of the night performances. You know, look, looking back, a couple of my fights I've had, notable fights that I've gone in there and had absolute barn burners. One was Gravely. You know, I come off a 2-year layoff, and that
Fantastic
a good fight. A fantastic. That was slightly different though. That was more of a high pace sort of grappling fight. And then there was that fight with Pedro, you know, and then the Pedro fight was slightly different, where it was more striking. I must have got dropped about 3 times. I lost count after number 3, to be honest. He just kept on dropping me. And although I watched them fights back with immense proudness, really, you know, even the loss with Pedro, you know, there's losses in my career that I'm not happy about, and there's wins in my career that I'm not happy about. But that Pedro Munoz loss, I love that fight. So you when you said there about like obviously performing, yeah, but everything has got to kind of add up correctly. Like MMA math doesn't usually work like with every single bout, you know. I know with Pedro it's slightly different. When I remember like kind of leading up to that fight, I remember doing interviews and I remember saying to people like, "Yeah, this is going to be a fight." People are like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "Look, I just know. I know it's going to be a fight, you know." And if nobody believes me, they can look back and like go on YouTube, check out some interviews before that fight. They'll see exactly what I mean. I was going in there. I think I was prepared for that fight to go the way it went. Not that I went in there to lose, because that's not. I've never gone in there once to lose. But Pedro Munoz was one of the only times I went in there for a fight, and I lost. Yeah. So I like with Pedro, I knew that fight was going to go that way. I don't know what happened in my brain or what happened to the lead up for that fight, but I knew it was going to go that way, and it went to the T how I expected it to go. I was going to be I was going to be in a lot of pain, but I knew it was going to be entertaining and that. And yeah, like I said, I'd go as far as say my last maybe 4 fights just haven't gone the way that I've liked them to go. But then the 4 fights before that, they went exactly how I was, and I was. So it's not like as if people like look at me now and say, "Oh, he's not very entertaining." At the end of the day, you people that were watching this have got to realize. I realize it's an entertainment sport, so that's why I put like I've spoken to Bellator about this, and things need to be changed. But then I also people need to realize from my point of view, I'm looking at everybody else's point of view and saying, yes, it's an entertainment sport. Yes, people are tuning to watch fights, not watch someone hug someone for 50 minutes. I get it. But then they got to look at the element of these fighters who step in there. They've got families, they got mouths to feed. So there's that element as well. And when I went in there, I wasn't expecting the fight to go the way it went. This fight, and I'll pick another notable one for me that went the same sort of way, was the Montel Jackson fight, my last fight in UFC, because I went in there with a complete different mindset of how that fight was going to go. And then all of a sudden I was on my back in Abu Dhabi, realizing how did I get here? You know, these things kind of happen. So it didn't go the way I wanted it to go. I was expecting to get a finish with Winsky in them later rounds. But unfortunately, I think we're halfway through the second round. I threw a kick, and I literally saw I had immense pain in my foot. Now I've had it scanned, I've had it X-rayed, and apparently they just said it's all clear. But it's been 3 weeks since the fight, and I'm still in agony walking around yet. You know, so there's definitely something wrong with that foot. Maybe I'm going to need to see some like some. I probably need to get some sort of like professional advice there. But when that happened to my foot halfway through the second round, I'll be honest with you, my game plan instantly changed. It went from like, oh look, we're getting somewhere here. We could potentially get the finish end of the second, beginning of the third, to just get through this fight, you know. And unfortunately, that was the sort of approach I took. And after the fight, Bellator weren't happy with the performance, but you know, it is one of them things for me. It is like sort of like a catch-22. I could have gone in there and swung for the fences with a bad foot, but I couldn't really stand on the thing. So at the end of the day, I knew I needed to take it down and take it to the floor and kind of secure a position. Could I have been a little bit more offensive? I think I could have. Maybe, like I said, I played it a little bit too safe. But these are things that I'm learning. Like, yes, I've had 21 professional fights, but in my opinion, I learn every time I'm in there, you know, and just a bit unfortunate. But obviously, I'm looking to change some things up over the next few months. In training, outside of training, I'm looking to change some things up. And what I mean by outside of training, I mean the social media approach of things, the interview side of things. But I'm changing up everything. I'm changing some things up with my own career, because I think I'm coming to the latter stages of my career. That's not me saying right now that I'm going to be retired soon, because that's not what I'm saying. But things need to change, and I'm in the process of changing them.
So you've mentioned in a couple of your points there, there's like there's an underlying rhetoric, which is there's an in-fight dialogue that you have. Right? You mentioned in the Pedro Munoz fight, you lost count of the amount of times that he dropped you after 3. You said in the Montel Jackson fight, you went in with a very specific game plan and then ended up on your back and you were looking up and like, oh shit, what are we doing here? Like, is that? And then obviously against Winsky, you land the kick and you're like, okay, well, my game plan needs to change right now because this fight has changed. Can you talk me through the internal dialogue that you have? Because that is something I find very interesting. That in fights, fighters are often reacting without thought, right? In a lot of ways, because the situations are happening so fast, and especially at the lighter weight classes, these positions are changing so quickly that it's a lot of muscle memory. It's a lot of where your technique has been drilled into you. But can you talk me through the internal dialogue that you happen to have in fights, and how does that help or hinder?
I don't know, like you said, there's a lot of things there where you kind of do with muscle memory. You don't think, you react, you know, and I think that's to do with the amount of training you've done, and not so much the amount of training, but the amount of positions you've been in, and you think in the fight you just do it as if it's like, you know, as if you're being controlled. And with me and my coaches, that's the sort of relationship we got, where I think it was the Kershed fight back in February.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the Bellator officials come up to me after the fight and said, I have never ever watched a fight where a coach has said something to a fighter and the fighter listened every step of the way. Now that happened in February, because the fight in September, apparently I wasn't listening at all. So like, that happens. You know, there was other factors in the fight, in small factors in the fight in September than February. For example, the fight back in February, I had Kershed in my corner where my coaches were right there. This time I was in the opposite corner, so maybe I couldn't hear, because if you've been to the 3 Arena on Fight Night, the place is exceptionally loud, you know. So that was the thing there, you know. And yeah, like a lot of things isn't, but there will be times in the fight where you will plan to do something and it'll go completely wrong. Like I said, the Montel Jackson fight was a prime example. I just remember going in there thinking, oh man, I got his number in the stand-up. You know, I know he's a southpaw, I know he's a dangerous southpaw, but I know what I'm doing with him. And I threw this right hand, and it was one of the only times in my career where I threw the right hand and it didn't even pass his face. And I thought, oh no, I've fallen into a trap here. And then he responded with a slip left hand, which caught me damn well near perfect. The only thing it didn't do was knock me out, you know. And I remember being on my back and vaguely seeing Montel run towards me, because I was quite dazed from the shot. And then I thought, well, right now we just got to get through the fight, you know. And yeah, of course I could have gone in there, maybe stood up again and risk getting dropped again, because that's the sort of, you know, with my fighting style, there is very much a line between being entertaining and then the line between getting through the fight, you know. So the last few fights, I've obviously crossed the line towards being safe and winning these fights. But now I'm finding myself, I need to get closer to the line where it says you should be having more of these entertaining fights. But I'm not going to jump towards the other line, if you know what I mean. I'm just going to take my little steps every fight to try and get a happy medium of being, one, exciting, and two, getting success in these fights, you know?
Can I play devil's advocate?
Yeah, go on.
So you mentioned there that you feel personally like you err on the side of caution, right? You are on the obviously you go in there to win, right? And you go in there to win dominantly, but you go in there looking to protect your own health. And you're saying there that you feel as though partially you should err more on the side of caution and more on the side of entertainment. Well, there were a lot of people saying that Khabib Nurmagomedov's style was horrendously boring until he got to 25-0 and everyone was saying he was the greatest of all time. I think there is a misconception about people that can grapple and guys that are able to grapple dominantly. The fight against Kershev, I wasn't there live, but I was watching live, and all of us in the SevereMMA chat were talking about how incredible it was to watch you implement a game plan and write a game plan out on the canvas with such fluidity. I also think, and this is the question I'll pose to you, you mentioned again, you have a family, but you also have a personal life to live. And
Yeah.
in and getting dropped by Pedro Munoz 3 times and getting dropped by Montel Jackson and maybe standing in an all-out war with whoever the next guy is, that doesn't do well for your brain health. That's something that you have to think about, right?
Yeah, I think subconsciously you do think about every fight, and Do you know what is, Harry? Sometimes you walk in there, the whole occasion might get you, and then that like what you said there is probably, you know, bang on, really nailed on, is where you do go in there with that sort of, I've got to look after myself here, but then the occasion can get you. You spend fight week at the hotel, you see these different fighters, you see these different names. When you walk in the venue, you see different like fighter celebrities sitting on the side of the cage, and you think, I've got to try and impress these guys, blah blah blah. So yeah, like I do go in there with an element of playing it safe, but obviously now that hasn't really worked out for me now, especially after the last fight where the promotion itself are not particularly too happy with the performance. So I've got two options. I can either stay the same and risk losing my job, or I've got to kind of do something about it. But like I said, I'm not going to be that guy that's going to just start turning up in these fights where I'm going to be, you know, reckless. I think that's the word. I'm not going to all of a sudden just turn up and be reckless in these fights. You know, if I'm going to be entertaining, it's going to be the way that I think it's going to be entertaining, and not the way that people want to. Obviously, even when I watch a fight, I think I'm a culprit to it. You want to watch a fight, you want to watch two guys fighting. You know, you want to watch two guys dropping each other left, right, and center. But I don't want to be like, obviously, you know, after like the Pedro fight, like I said, there was that feeling. I loved that feeling of being in there with Pedro and having that sort of fight with him. But, you know, in another breath, it's like, it took a lot of, like, let's call it subconscious fighting years from me. You know what I mean? I don't want to really go through that again unless I'm going to be winning, if you know what I mean. And yeah, you know, obviously there's pressure on me at the minute when it comes to performing and performing slightly different and being more fan friendly, because I think a lot of people out there don't think I'm fan friendly. But exactly what you said about Habib, this was a conversation I had with my coach recently about Habib. A lot of Habib's fight went the same sort of way. I fight again a similar sort of way. Don't get me wrong, you know, I don't wrestle bears in Llanelli. There is no bears here, you know. Only my little miniature poodle I wrestle, but that's about it. But yeah, I fight in a very similar way, and a lot of people might have not been a big fan of him, but that it's a legacy he's got. That's what people remember. They don't go, oh, do you know, like Habib's 23rd fight? Do you remember how that went? Nobody knows, unless you're a super fan of Habib. Nobody knows how it went. You know what I mean? It could be the most boring fight in the world, but I guess yes, performances speak, but long term records speak as well. You know, at the end of the day, with me, I've got the luxury of saying, and I do take immense pride saying this, that I have fought everybody that's been put in front of me, whether I win, lose, or draw. It's something that I'm very proud of. Going in there with the best fighters in the world. Like, don't get me wrong, I wasn't particularly too happy with the Aljamain Sterling fight. I wasn't particularly too happy with the Sabatello fight. But they're against two really good guys, former world champions. You know, obviously Aljo is the UFC champion, but I wasn't happy with the performance. And I'd be happy to go. I'd happy to go in there again, and maybe I'd lose the same sort of way. But as long as I could say that I felt like I was in there, I'd be happy. But that's the luxury I've got, Harry, is being able to say that I went in there, win or lose, against the best guys. There's no essence of, oh yeah, but has he really fought anybody worth mentioning? Nobody needs to say that about me. And I prefer to take loss from my record being like that rather than being undefeated and fighting nobodies, you know?
So I'm going to give a slight answer, and I'm going to segue to the next question. The next question is the big question, right? The segue on continuing in your style and, you know, maybe losing your job or maybe not being fan friendly. I mean, Leon Edwards has been called boring over and over and over and over again. He's been called decision machine. He's been called this, that, and the next thing. He's now a welterweight champion in the
Yeah.
So I feel like I understand from some aspect, and we're going to talk about that now, the Bellator promotional arm saying, look, we want finishes, or we want this, or we want that. But it's not them fighting. It's not them losing, not fighting years. I'm going to be more blunt. Actual years from your life. It's not them going in there and risking your family's next 6 months' bills just for their entertainment purposes. And at the end of the day, they're not paying you millions of pounds. So if they were paying you millions of pounds and you could retire off 2 or 3 fights, fine. I can understand why there would be more of a lean to them to say, look, I want you to go in there and leave absolutely everything on the line. But that's not the case. So I'm going to segue now to the point that you and your coach, Richard, have been talking about on social media, and that's the lack of limelight placed on you pre-fight, post-fight. My question is this. Do you think that on the whole, European fighters have a harder time in North American promotions of being seen and heard? And if you think that's the case, why do you think that?
Yeah, I do think that we, and I don't think it's like, I think it's subconsciously it happens, you know. I feel like we slip through the net then, let's just say that, you know, where a lot of the news outlet, sorry, a lot like we have a lot of MMA outlets here back in European MMA. A lot of big sort of news outlets are more or less based in the US. There's a lot of shows on in the US. So like, you know, the home of mixed martial arts, in my opinion, is the US, you know. And I do think that a lot of fighters kind of, especially if you're an away fighter, let's not beat on the bush. I was meant to go in there and fight James Gallagher. I was the away fighter, even though I live 40 minutes away from Dublin in a plane. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, I did look. I did feel disrespected. I did feel, well, am I just am I some sort of like, you know, you got the Christmas presents of Irish MMA getting given out, and I'm the kind of stalking filler that's just on the side of the card, you know. And it kind of did annoy me because, you know, originally that fight was meant to be James Gallagher. We were fighting before Yoel Romero or Melvin Manoif. It was a big deal to me, you know, being on that card with the likes of them two. You know, obviously with Peter Queally and with Benson Henderson as well. It was a big deal. And, you know, I remember turn up fight week thinking, oh, well, we probably have a lot of interviews to do. Turned up and they were like, nope, no interviews. And a little bit of me was like, oh, well, that's okay, because then I can concentrate, relaxing, getting my training in, you know. And then obviously the fight happened, and then I walk out and there's nothing at all. I'm thinking this was a lot different to February's fight then. You know what I mean? This was a lot different where we did interviews pre-fight, post-fight. You know, we had microphone time in the cage as well, and unfortunately that didn't happen. So you gotta like, yes, I understand from a Bellator point of view, maybe they were running behind with time and so on, but it just felt a little bit. I felt I was a little bit hard done by, because I felt like everybody else on that card had an opportunity to say their piece except for me. So that's why I felt like it needed to be tweeted about. And, you know, that's when I had the response from Bellator to say that they weren't happy with things. If that's their reason of why I didn't get interviewed, that's fair enough. But they got to realize, for me to be able to promote myself and to kind of excel and trying to create the name, is to have this microphone time, which I didn't get the last fight. So in my opinion, the whole social media side of things, where you gain followers and traction through social media, but I couldn't even emphasize on that. You know, if I went and ended a flash KO, then I would have created some followers. But a lot of followers are gained through post-fight, you know, speeches after the fight and stuff. And I didn't get the opportunity, so I felt like I missed out on that social media presence, as well as missing out on my personal goals of telling Bellator what I would have liked to have done. And if they would have given me the microphone that night, they would have seen that I've got a good game plan, and a good, not supposed a game plan as in with fighting. I mean, a good game plan of what I'd like to do in the next few months. But yeah, obviously I was less frustrated, and I had a chat with some guys, and then Bellator got in touch, and I had a chat with my manager and the guys at Bellator, and yeah, that's, you know, that's the way it is.
So what did they specifically say was wrong with the performance?
Just felt like I just felt, I think what they said in their own words were like, well, just look, I'll see what my manager says. It's slightly different to what my manager said, but it's along the lines of, they don't feel like I'm a fan friendly fighter. Like, my fights aren't really fan friendly, as in I'm not, as in with my fights with Bellator. Unfortunately, I've had 4 scheduled fights with Bellator. I was meant to fight Mateus Matos on my debut, and then 6 days before, he unfortunately picked up COVID-19 and was replaced with Danny Sabatello. who technically in the grand scheme of things is a stylistically completely different fighter to Mateus Matos. I dropped the decision there. And then my next fight was October in Arizona. You know, I went out to, I kind of used my own money to get out to Arizona, landed in Arizona a bit earlier just to acclimatize. And then Eric Perez unfortunately picked up COVID-19. And then the fight was scrapped completely while I was up in Arizona. So that was quite frustrating. Then they had the Kershed fight. Obviously, with the Kershed fight, still a lot of people weren't really happy with that, with how that fight went. Even though it was a stoppage, I think a lot of people, or maybe not a lot of people, but maybe Bellator weren't happy with the way that fight went. And then obviously the last one, I think I'm not sure if Winsky was put in there for me to finish, or if Winsky was kind of the fighter. But you know, I think that's a lot of disrespect towards Winsky because he's a tough character, and at the end of the day, things happened outside that camp and in the fight where, you know, like I said previously, I needed to change some things up. Yeah, it's one of them, really, isn't it? You know.
And this is, so my opinion on building stock, right, is that more and more these promotions, the bigger promotions anyway, are putting far less marketing dollars into their fighters in terms of promoting them, and they're more piggybacking from what these fighters are doing outside the cage, right, on their social media. You look at somebody like Paddy Pimblett, somebody like Conor McGregor, somebody like Israel Adesanya, somebody like, you know, Demetrius Johnson, who have these massive social media presences. These are people who are so easy, quote unquote, to market because the UFC can just leverage what the fighter's already done.
Yeah.
Feels to me as though it's lazy promoting from these companies, but also it's lazy promoting to turn around. And it's not like Kershev isn't a good fighter. It's not like Kershev isn't a tough opponent. And you go in there and you execute a game plan where round one, you sap his energy. Round two, you start to dominate. And round three, you get him out of there. If that's not a perfect fight, I don't know what is. And if you can't find a way to market that, then what are we doing in the fighting business?
Yeah, like you said there, Harry, you bang on that because of, I think the Kershaw fight was mentioned that it wasn't particularly an entertaining fight, but like they wanted finishes and they wanted dominant fights, and I think that fight for me, as in if I look as a performance as a whole, didn't take a shot, managed to get in there and get out of there, got a finish. I think that was pretty much damn well perfect for the way that I look at fighting. You know what I mean? Like obviously the Winsky fight was slightly different, but the one in February, I felt like, you know, it was executed fine. And like, look, even pre-fight, before the fight had even happened, Bellator were amazing with like setting up things with like Swansea City Football Club, which is a big thing for me. And because originally, what I originally thought was we were fighting Gallagher. That fight was going to kind of sell itself. You know, obviously Gallagher kind of does talk trash, and you know I wasn't going to take it lying down either. You know, and then I thought it was some big promotion year, and then obviously when he pulled out, a little bit of me was disheartened, where I thought, well, no, they're not going to bother promoting me whatsoever now. And then they said, oh look, you know, we've got a day of media stuff with BBC down in Swansea City, and I was like, oh wow, that was a surprise I didn't expect. So then I was a little bit more upbeat then, because I thought, well, at least now they would, even with the fight with Winsky, they were showing initiative to get that traction, to get that publicity going. And I think a lot of people, like, don't get me wrong, a couple of guys from America are probably thinking, what the hell is this soccer team doing on Bellator or whatever? But with myself and a lot of fighters like that sort of side of me, you know, it's fighting was a hobby of mine, then it became a job, and then I had to create other hobbies, because you cannot do your job and then go home and then your hobby is your job, if you know what I mean. You have to change some things up, and that's what I did. I just introduced Swansea City into my life, and like next Sunday is our local derby against Cardiff City. Is a massive day. I'll be going down there. But going back to Bellator, they had me down there for the day, seeing all the players. It was amazing. I got to meet up with a friend of mine, Lee Trundle, who's a Swansea City legend. That was amazing. So pre-fight, before even going out to Dublin, I thought, oh wow, they are showing, they are backing me here. And then when we got to Dublin, it went quiet. So that's a little bit like why I was confused with it all, especially pre-fight, the way they were with me pre-fight. It's just, I think it's the name. I think obviously it's the name of who am I fighting? Like, hopefully this time that side of the fighting, the self-promotion side of it, that's going to be knocked at the park with who I'm fighting next with a bit of luck, you know?
Yeah, I do feel conflicted though. And I feel conflicted because to me, you're somebody incredibly easy to promote. You talk well. Okay, you may not go out and throw spinning wheel kicks and
Yeah.
finish fights.
Only because I can't, Harry. I'm not flexible enough.
but you're going out, you're winning against good guys, or if you're not winning against good guys, you're in competitive fights against the elite of the elite. You're taking fights that are given to you. You're easy to work with from that perspective. A lot of fighters, and I mean a lot of fighters that I talk to, you try to ask them, who are you outside of fighting? And the answer is, I'm a fighter.
Yeah.
But the depth of personality, the rounded personality that you hold, that's something that creates avenues into other fan bases. And I also feel, Dublin is one of the fighting hubs of Europe. If you can't promote a, let's be honest, local fighter in
Yeah.
one of the hubs of Europe, what are we doing? And especially if it was Bellator's first show in Dublin, I would understand. No problem. New market. I get it. But this is a market that Bellator thrives in. The Three Arena is Bellator's home in Europe.
I'd go as far as saying I think it could potentially be their sort of, that's like one of their main places. If you look at the UFC, they've got the T-Mobile Arena. Like, if they go back to Dublin twice a year. Like, that doesn't happen often where you can go back to a show and sell out twice a year. I think it's one of the, I'd say, obviously I know they're based in California, but I'd say equally Dublin is their like main spot,
Right. And that's my point.
It's just like, at the end of the day as well, I understand there's 30 other guys in the card and everybody's got to have their promotion or whatever, but Harry, I've been doing this for a long time. I was looking through the records of fighters. I'm 19 wins and 3 losses. I've seen guys in the card on the beginning of that card who are 2-3-0. It's like, and I like, and even like watching a couple of the guys who were below me on the card get some sort of recognition, and good for them. Like, that's not me having a go at them. At the end of the day, it's good for them. But I do feel like I think they thrive off being in Ireland and having Irish fighters on the card, and they're able to thrive off that. But a little bit means like, well, why don't you branch out and try and get the surrounding areas? You got Scottish fighters out there, you got Welsh fighters out there, you got, even the English boys that come over, At the end of the day now, I know what I need to do, and unfortunately, me sitting down and talking hasn't got through to them. So now I've had to react and do something where I'm going to have to get out my comfort zone and do something about it, which, in my opinion, I have done. And hopefully, with a bit of luck, that will be all done and dusted by the end of the month,
Let's see. Now, I'll ask you the last question because I know I've had you for 45 minutes now. You mentioned there that there are fighters in other localities that are brimming ready for a chance on these cards. It feels to me as though Welsh MMA is at its strongest that it's ever been. And it feels as though we are having fighters, or athletes, I should say, maybe coming from football, maybe straying from rugby and choosing MMA at an early age instead of following the traditional Welsh roots, right? When I was growing up, it was my family were always like, it was rugby.
Yeah.
And I fucking hated rugby.
Yeah.
Or could you put your finger on why is Welsh MMA rising like it is right now?
Look, I'll be honest. I think it's more to do with how well known the sport's becoming in Wales. I do think you got England, you got Scotland, Ireland, Wales. And I think we're the last to join this party. That's what it feels like, you know. And that's no fault of anybody's. That's just the way it's gone. You know, I feel like we've lacked Welsh representatives over the years. You know, we've been very lucky in the past to have good fighters, such as, you know, I'm on about the really back in the early days, like Paul Jenkins was one of the main guys years ago. And unfortunately, I don't think the UFC was. I know it was probably maybe about, but it wasn't like as big machine, because he would have been one of the first guys on there. But then throughout the years, then we started getting the names like John Phillips and Jack Marshman, a lot of different guys. Liu Long, obviously, still involved with Bellator, and then you come into the new breed of fighters again. You know, myself, myself, Jack Shaw. Like, Jack is one of them guys, in my opinion. That's our greatest hope of a major title. I really do. I think the guy is, you know, being around the guy every day, he's special, man. Like, I'm even putting myself in that category. I still feel like that Jack is that guy to bring home a major title. But you got representatives like him, you know, Corey McKenna. I know Mason Jones is about as well, and you know, and then back in the Cage Warriors level, you got Orban Elliott, Josh Reed, you know, Scott Patterson. So we're all coming through the ranks. That we've definitely starting to get a lot of people coming through. I just feel like as if another thing as well. One of them childhood dreams of mine now. And put it this way: if I could manage to pull this dream off, I think I'd happily call it a day after this. Is being able to bring a major promotion back to Wales and headlining it, which would be having a Bellator in Wales and being, okay, maybe headline it, but being involved in some big way. You know, Swansea have a new arena. I'd love it to be there. Obviously, I'd love to be the headline, because that would be a bucket list thing for me. You know, obviously being involved in the Bellator card as a main event would be huge. But more than that, being in Wales and bringing a major promotion home. Like, I know PFL come to Cardiff a few months ago, but you know, I think we had one or two Welsh guys on the card, but they were more on the undercard. You know what I mean? It'd be nice to have people buy tickets for a show to watch a local lad just go in there and perform. You know, with the big guys of the division, with the big names of the division, but do it in Swansea and or Cardiff. You know, if there's a preference, it'd be Swansea, only because of I'm a Swansea lad and we've got a massive rivalry with Cardiff. But you know, I won't mind doing it in Cardiff if I've been a main event in Cardiff Motor Point Arena before. I'll do it again. You know, so that would be the dream of mine. And if I achieved that, I could happily walk off in the sunset. Obviously, the only thing I'm gaining after that is the sort of financial benefit of fighting. That would be taking fights to try and create some sort of avenues outside of fighting. That's all that is, you know. At the end of the day, this money that I'm getting is to kind of create a future. And one of the things I'd like to do, bear in mind my main headquarter gym is in SevereMMA in Abertillery. Believe it or not, from where I'm sitting now to the gym is 2 hours away. And I do that Monday to Saturday morning, you know what I mean? So it'd be nice to maybe after my days of fighting create something closer to home. And the good thing with me is that I've been there and done it, and the pictures on the wall that people can see, and that's what's going to get the people in. And yeah, and like you said earlier, this game is rising in Wales, and there's a lot of people who want to do it. So it'd be nice to kind of give back to the community as well, you know.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, look, I'll call time there. Before we leave, please give a plug to any sponsors you'd like. Please give any plug to any training partners, anyone you fancy, anything you fancy shouting out. Do so now, please.
Yeah, I just want to thank, you know, obviously, I want to thank everybody that's been involved in my career, my manager, Sucker Punch, Brian Butler, you know, most importantly, my teams, you know, like Brett Jones, MMA, you know, them boys as well have been absolutely fantastic over the years. I can't not say and speak about like Jack Shaw and Jack and Richard Shaw for everything they've done for me over the years. Very, very happy with all of them. Want to thank obviously my nutritionist stuff with Taylor Muscle Academy, sponsors, Sapology, The Halfway, Tatami. I got so many guys to thank. I've also got 2 of these charities I'm working with at the minute. One of them is the Marvin Trust. Unfortunately, a few years ago, one of my mates passed away with this Marvin syndrome. So we're just trying to raise awareness. Another sort of charity I'm working with. You would have seen him on the banners in the fight, VOGM, the vein of Galen. Basically, it's a disease that affects little children. So we got a close family friend who's suffering with that at the minute. So we're just trying to raise awareness. At the end of the day, you know, that sponsor notice before the fight would be very good, you know, opportunity for some sort of charity to be on there and trying to raise awareness. So that's what we're doing. But other than that, yeah, thank yourself, thank you, Harry, and thank you the guys there for interviewing me, mate.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, my friend, and I'll chat to you soon.
No problem. Thank you, Harry. Have a good day.